Hello and welcome to the Growing Healthy Families podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Haggerty. On this show, I interview the world's top health experts so that you can know with certainty what it takes to give your family a life of epic health and wellness.
As parents, we don't want to see our kids struggle. I knew that he had the potential, and I knew that something needed to be done.
It was hard. We would get frustrated. We didn't know how to deal with it. I was more emotional about it.
Sure that, we're here. Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. Hello everyone, this is Dr. Scott Haggerty back with the Growing Healthy Families podcast. We are super excited to be here today. I am here with an amazing occupational therapist, Christine Chambers. She is the owner of Abilities First LLC in Fairview Park, Ohio. And I am super stoked for you guys to be able to learn about what she does. I have been lucky enough to see so many of the kids that we've referred over really benefit from the care that she and her staff provides. So let's go ahead and let's jump right in. So first, tell us all about yourself, Christine.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Wisconsin, and I've been married 25 years, and I have two great kids. They're 22 and 15, and I'm just excited to be here and working with you as well.
Well, that's awesome. So the topic that we chose to talk about today is ADHD and sensory issues. And, and the reason that we really wanted to go and dive in on this is because that's your specialty.
Yes.
The facility here is a really unique facility. For those of you who aren't familiar with occupational therapy, there's a lot of different ways that occupational therapy works. But in particular, Christine's practice has an amazing vision and an amazing group of kids they work with. So why don't you go ahead and describe that for us? Sure.
So we approach occupational therapy from a sensory processing perspective. We take a look at the whole child, how are all the different sensory systems working, what systems are online, what systems are a little offline that might be contributing to anything from a feeding issue, handwriting issue, behaviors, attention, difficulty, getting up, getting ready in the morning, functioning at school. So we kind of look at that entire perspective. And then we delve in from there. We look at the 8 different sensory systems and kind of really try to get some more information to help the parent and the child.
So I'd like to learn more about your background and your journey. So first, would you mind telling us about why you became an occupational therapist?
Sure. So I've always enjoyed working with children, and when I started looking at what are the different fields that work with children, I wanted something that I could really spend the time with the child, not just kind of pop in and out and do an assessment and then be gone. So I started looking anything from pediatrician to OT, PT, speech to social worker, and OT just fit. My interest in sensory, my understanding of sensory processing, it was a perfect fit for me. Yeah.
That's amazing, and you can tell when you work with the kids here, and just even being an observer, you can see the passion and the love they have for the kids and how much fun they have, and even just when you look around the way the practice is built, it's super pediatric friendly. So I would love to know more about your practice. Tell us about kind of what your practice mission is and vision and
Sure.
the things that you guys do here.
Sure. So we started this practice in 2007, and it was really, there was a gap in services for young children. I'd been working in early intervention, and when they hit 3, some of them qualified for school assessment, some didn't, and a lot of times they were right in the middle. They had some issues, but not enough to qualify for school services. If they went to an agency that was more medical model based, they didn't really qualify for services there. So there's these kids that I was seeing that I was working on sensory, working on some behavioral things, and then they'd hit 3 and they'd move on and they had nowhere to go. And so we really developed it for those kids that were just having issues, still in regular ed, but having these other problems. And it just sort of blossomed from there. Our philosophy is really to, like I said, take a look at the whole person and how does any of those issues affect your ability to function, to complete self-care tasks, to go through your day, to integrate and engage with other people, and to have fun. Are a lot of children just aren't seeming like they're having a good time. They're trying so hard, or they're avoiding things, and they're just not having fun playing.
Yep.
So to really have that piece too.
So for those of you who've never worked with a private practice occupational therapist like Christine's staff, one of the reasons I wanted to do this video is because so many kids are getting in-school OT. And kids will see some very tangible improvements in day-to-day activities at school, but that's not where it ends. And so, Christine's facility really does an amazing job of filling that gap where they can get the extra time they need outside of a school setting. So why don't you talk about how you fit that gap?
Sure. So sometimes, in a school setting, you have a short period of time, and it's very driven by a school-related goal. If you're falling out in certain school-related tasks. But quite often, kids are falling out more in the social piece, or when they go to birthday parties or family gatherings, or at home when they're trying to settle for bed, or feeding problems, staying organized, and those kind of things. And so that wouldn't be something you'd work on at a school. So this has the opportunity to work on all of those areas outside of the school, and then train the parent. Here's strategies to both prevent, regroup, and be able to be successful at home, community, as well as at school.
I want to highlight something that you said there, because one of the things that we talk a lot about in day-to-day practice is that there is so much more than just the child. There's the family effect. And when you said training the parents, that's huge, because many parents that we work with, they feel, let's say, maybe disempowered. They don't know what to do to help their kids with their struggles. And so one of the reasons that we work with Chris's facility as much as we do is because of the fact that that particular aspect is a critical component to success. Because moms and dads, if you're watching this podcast and you have a child that has a neurodevelopmental struggle, whether it's ADHD or sensory or autism, oftentimes if you don't know what to do to help your child, you're not empowered to give them the tools to get them through situations that are difficult. And I think that is an amazing piece of what you do. So thank you for that.
Sure, absolutely.
So I'd like you to talk about the kind of the breadth and scope of what you work with here in your practice, because I know the topic is sensory and ADHD, but for moms and dads that are watching this, obviously there's so many of those things that are comorbidities.
Sure.
So why don't you talk about the breadth and scope of what you work with?
So a lot of times families will come in and it'll be one, maybe it's feeding, or maybe it's their fine motor's off, or maybe there's some behaviors, or they're zoomy. And when they come in, we take a look at the whole person. So we look at all the areas, and quite often we start finding out, oh, well, here's a piece of that problem and it's showing up as a feeding problem, or here's a piece of this problem, a sensory system that's a little offline, and it's showing up as a handwriting problem. I don't want to write because I don't want to hold a pencil. So there are all those different parts. So we take a look at that whole part, and then we sort of piece together what are the systems that are offline, what are the ones that we can help work with, as well as what are the functional activities we can take care of. We also talk with parents about what is your daily routine, what does it look like to get up in the morning, how are they at the table, what does it look like to come home after school, what does it look like at bedtime, and try to help with those routine things, because that seems to be where there's the falling out. Is when as you're going through your daily routine. So then we might be doing something in the big motor room to get our body ready. We might be doing something at the table to get our eye-hand coordination or our writing skills going, or we might be doing some ADL type things. So just kind of hitting the gamut. We also have a lot of kids that come in with either picky eating or problem feeding, and so we work on a lot of feeding skills, kind of progressing to the next level of foods.
Yeah.
So.
So many times parents are confused about what's really going on inside their child. And I know one of the hot button topics is really sensory processing. And a lot of moms and dads don't really have a clear picture of what that is. So would you mind explaining to someone who maybe doesn't have a clear picture, or maybe is concerned that this might be something their child's dealing with, what it really is?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a lot of different parts and pieces to sensory processing. We have 8 sensory systems. When we're in school, we kind of learn about the 5, the core 5: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So we kind of know those. But then we also take a look at, there's the vestibular, or our movement system. And this kind of gives us that sense of where we are in the space, and that sense of moving forwards and backwards and upside down, and kind of controlling those movements. We also have the proprioceptive, which kind of gives us our body map. I know I'm sitting here, I know my feet are flat on the floor. When I walk up the stairs, I know where my feet are. I don't have to look down at my feet. So it gives us that information. And then the interoception, which I think for a lot of our kids is one of the hardest. Being aware of that internal. What's my heart rate like? How does my stomach feel? Am I hungry? Am I not hungry? Do I know I have to go to the bathroom? All those kind of things can really be overwhelming. If you're not sensing those correctly, then you're struggling with a lot of different daily life skills. So those are all the parts and pieces of sensory processing. We all have preferences and variations within that. Somebody might really like to live in leggings and shirts and stuff like that, but it's not affecting their daily life. But somebody else might like jeans. But there might be a student, and I've had several of these kids, literally there is one t-shirt they can wear and one pair of shorts and that's it. You know, so that's where sensory processing goes into this is a problem. You know, if you just like certain kinds of clothes, but it doesn't affect your life, it's fine. Same with the movement. Some kids are, you know, most toddlers are busy, they move. But if you have one that's moving constantly and just can't even sit to play with the toy, you know, that's where it starts going into the problem area. So you can be over or under arousing on any one of those systems. A variety is usually what we see, and then we just start hitting those systems and getting them back online.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, many moms and dads think, wow, my child just won't ever shut down. And, you know, they wonder if there's something that's going on in the background or if this is normal.
Right.
And I think it's great that you highlighted that because so many moms and dads that I talk to on a regular basis are like, my child just won't stop moving.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so when you look at that, it's great to bring an awareness point to that because many moms and dads are like, is this normal?
Right. Right, and with any developmental level, there's a normal piece of like, you finally learn how to walk, so you're just like, I'm walking everywhere. And you know, even when I worked in early intervention, we'd have kids that didn't walk, and their fine motor skills got better, and then they got up and walked, and they really didn't do as much of their fine motor because they were so excited about just moving. But when it's moving to the point that you're not able to participate in other things, or it becomes a meltdown if somebody tries to encourage you to participate in other things. And sometimes that movement is you're seeking movement. Other times it's you're avoiding. You might not like touch or you might not like certain sensations, so you're zooming the room just to be away from any kind of input you don't like. So it can be on either end. So that's where it's really important to kind of tease out what exactly is that underlying root, you know, and then you hit the right sensory system. And it's amazing when you hit the right sensory system and strategies, you just see some beautiful things change. And the kids, if you can envision it, it's like they feel better in their skin. They just are like, okay, I don't have to zoom around and avoid all this input, or I don't have to zoom around and try to fill my bucket with input all day and not play. Because they really do want to engage and they really do want to play. And so I think for them it gets really frustrating when they can't. They just can't shut down. And I've had older kids actually tell me, like, my brain won't shut down. I'm so focused on moving. And I'm like, okay, let's feed that system, calm it down, and then you can sit and they feel so much better.
And that was wonderful that you said that because that's something that I think probably any parent that's got a child with any kind of a sensory issue, and of course, you know, ADHD and a lot of these things they're very similar in pattern, just they go down different pathways. And so moms and dads, if this is something that resonates with you, understand that what she said is gold for you. Because you've probably sat there and watched your child struggle with situational anxiety because of things like, you know, going into an environment being overstimulated or not being able to go and regulate the, you know, the situation they're in and dealing with these ongoing struggles. So let's dig a little more into the specifics of if a mom and dad is watching the podcast and they're sitting there saying, this might be my kid, what would be the first steps they would take to start finding out if this is something that is going on in their child?
Sure. So one of the easiest things to do is there's a variety of things, even online checklists, that you can just kind of, a couple of the things we talked about, it'll say, you know, well, look at some of these items, is your child doing these? And sometimes you'll read it and go, oh my God, that's my kid. And you'll read it and go, they have one or two, but that's not really my child. So that's a super easy one to just go ahead and do. You can call a pediatrics office that has an occupational therapist. You want to make sure it's somebody that works with sensory, has extended training in sensory processing, because we all have different specialties. And so, you know, if you're looking at and questioning sensory, you want to make sure that. And then you could call them. A lot of times, most of us will talk to you on the phone. If you just even have questions, just call and say, can I talk to somebody for 5 minutes? Even on the phone, and you know, with your own profession, you can kind of hit those red flags and know, wow, there's something going on. And then you can certainly come in and do an assessment and have all those areas looked at. I just had a mom today. She was like, I'm not sure what direction, and we're just trying to rule out, is this sensory? Could it be attention? Could it be something else? Is it behavioral? Where do we need to go? And the great thing about sensory is if we start to see some of those sensory issues, we can work on them therapeutically and sort of peel that open. And as you peel that open, as you calm down this system or that, you get to the root. And then you can see, you know what, it was just sensory. We calm those systems down and they're right on target for their other skills. Or we open it up and we're like, nope, there was a couple other things going on. There was some true attention issues, or there was some true anxiety issues going on. So it's a real easy way to kind of just see what's going on and try some things.
Yeah, and so, you know, if someone that doesn't have experience with what coming into an OT's office looks like, what would they expect when they come in, let's say both for the assessment and then for therapy sessions?
Sure. Sure. So if you're coming in and you have questions about sensory processing, quite often it's going to look very play-based. We have a lot of fun. We're the fun OT. So you'll come in. Generally, we encourage you to come in with your child. Kids are often very hesitant, but they'll see once they come in. I mean, we have like our motor room has swings from the ceiling. It's got raised structure to climb on. It's got slides. It's got all kinds of different equipment. And a lot of times it's clinical observations for the first part. What are they tending towards? What are they seeking out? Where are they going? And as we move through those different activities with them, we're looking at what is their body? What are their balance reactions? What are their reflexes? How does that all integrate? We get a lot of parent report. We typically try to have 2 therapists in there at a time. So one is doing stuff with the child and keeping them on target, and one is really sitting down with the parent and getting a lot of parent report. Tell me about what they were like at birth, and how well did they sleep or eat, and what were their sleeping patterns. A lot of those things are some early red flags that then as we're observing the child moving, we can link those two. We usually also do some sort of sensory profile that checks off all the different things and some standardized testing. But it's very fun and play-based. We try to make it, not at all overwhelming for the child. And then we typically go into a smaller room and we look at, are they different in a smaller room? Can they do some stuff at a table? And we pull out some developmentally appropriate things. If they're older, we might be doing some writing things or some drawing things. If they're younger, it's blocks and cars and just different things. How do they interact with toys? How long do they stay with toys? How do they interact with these 2 new therapists? With mom in the room, but can they engage, or are they zipping around and gone? And then when they come in for regular sessions, now we've already from the assessment determined what areas we need to work on, and so we go ahead and focus in on those areas. But sensory integration is the adult kind of, not controls, but sort of organizes the situation, but the child makes a lot of choices. It's a lot of child-led. So we do a lot of turn taking. Here's something I want you to work on, and then they get to pick a preferred, and then here's something. But they have a choice of preferred that we've already identified. So they get some choices, because kids should have some choices in what they do.
Definitely.
So they have some choices, but we control the amount of choices. So they're feeling affirmed by those choices as well. And then there's always homework. We encourage the parent to be in for at least part of the session. And then there's homework for the parent to kind of help that child move through. Again, very fun-based, play-based. And the goal is that those things become part of their routine. You don't want to go, okay, stop my life, I'm going to do my 30 minutes of OT. It should be, we try to help them integrate it into your getting up in the morning routine, or your bedtime routine, or your after school routine, so that it flows. Because if it becomes part of your routine, you'll do it every day. If it's a standalone, I have to do this, extra thing, on a good day it happens, yourself. On a bad day, I didn't get to it. And it's the consistency that makes the difference.
And I think that's an important point to hit, because moms and dads, if this is something that you're looking at for your own child, there's some underlying things that happen within a child's brain that require this kind of consistency. So, we're all built so that our brains, especially when we're younger, are very plastic, and they're very changeable when they're young. And so the consistency that she's talking about with both the in-office work and the homework, it helps with strengthening and refining the pathways so that we can control the progress, right? And that's in my office, when we set up a care plan, there's a consistency phase where we have to treat with frequency over a duration so that we can get a desired result.
Absolutely.
And that's the exact same thing you're saying, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. It's super important. And it was interesting that you say pathways, because a lot of times when I talk with families about sensory processing issues, I talk about superhighways. And a lot of times if you have a sensory system that's not registering correctly, I think of it as, trying to go through a muddy dirt road. And it's just not happening. And as we keep going through, as we do those activities over and over in fun ways, we start building this superhighway. And then all of a sudden, those nerve impulses can move along, and I can register that information, make an appropriate reaction, and go about my day. And so it makes a huge difference.
It really does. It really does. I know one of the analogies oftentimes we use, like when we do a lot of our patient educationals, we'll talk about how if you throw a stone in the middle of a raging river, right, the water's going to still move around it. It might be disrupted, might not be as clean, but it's going to find a pathway. Because that's the way our nervous system works, right? The brain's always got to have feedback, right? Because the brain is an input first system. It requires input from the brain, into the brain, from the spinal cord and the extremities, to be able to make decisions about how to regulate us. But if those pathways are bumpy, disrupted, then the brain can't make adequate decisions or accurate decisions about how to go and run our body.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you tack on that other part of sensory processing, the arousal level. So we're taking in all this information from all these 8 systems, the 1 internal and the 7 external, and then we're trying to regulate that, and we're trying to keep ourselves at this calm, alert state. And a lot of times, I talk about a bucket. We fill our bucket too fast.
Yep.
It's all this sight is coming in, and maybe I'm anticipating a test, and there's this, and there's that, or there's things going on, and all of a sudden my bucket's overflowing, and I'm overwhelmed, possibly even by something that would not normally overwhelm me. And so looking at what are the strategies to calm myself down, to get back to green, to get back to calm alert, so that I can function. And so, we do a lot of that as well.
You touched on that, because I know what you were talking about there,
Okay.
but why don't you explain to parents what you were just talking about with being on green?
On green. Okay, sorry. So a lot of times we talk about zones of regulation, and we talk about that calm alert state where I am ready to function, my ears are turned on, I'm focused. That's what we call the green zone. As we move through our day, as little things happen, we might start eking up into the yellow zone. Maybe, as parents, maybe, your kids weren't ready on time and you got to get them out to the bus, and so you're starting to eke towards yellow zone. They have the same thing. Maybe you're, harping on them like, hurry up and eat, we got to get to the bus, so they're kind of ramping up into yellow. Yellow is where you're starting to feel a little overwhelmed. Or for my busy kiddos, yellow is where you're starting to get a little silly. You're not completely out of control, but you're starting to get a little silly. Red is where you're starting to really come undone. You're exploding, you might be yelling, there might be, for some kids they lash out a little bit. For other kids, they get super ramped up and they're just zooming the room. And I call it kind of that out of body. They're not listening to you. Whatever you're telling them when they're in the red zone, whether they're having a tantrum on the floor or zooming the room, they can't hear you. And so it's looking at, okay, so what are some activities to bring them back down? And then we also have the blue zone, and this is for when you're feeling sick or tired or under, aroused, and you're just kind of like, I can't get off the couch, I just don't feel like it. And so there's activities for that. So part of it is helping kids understand the zones, and again, being aware within themselves what zone they're in, and then giving them a handful of strategies. When you're here and you're in this yellow zone, you can do something. And I find that's really helpful for the kids to know, I don't have to be obligated by this explosion of red zone. I can actually do something for myself. And that's it's so empowering.
And I agree about that, because I refer so many people over here because of the fact that you do so many different comprehensive strategies to help parents and kids to understand their level of arousal. Because we work with a lot of kids with ODD issues, and I know we've talked about this in the past. But many times there's just a lack of awareness, because so many kids will go over the edge so quickly, but there was warning signs. And I love the fact that you guys implement zones of regulation, because for the child, but also for the family, it gives them an awareness. And talk about how families can use zones of regulation when the child does have these kinds of challenges.
Sure. So I encourage parents to use the zones of regulation both with the kids but with themselves. So I feel like kids really watch us. Even when we don't think they're watching us, they really watch us. So if you're starting to feel overwhelmed as a parent, maybe they're starting to misbehave, or maybe something's going on. I've actually, even with my own kids, they're adults now, but I've taken myself out of the situation, like, I'm in the yellow, and I need to go over here and take a minute. And it shocks the heck out of them. They're like, oh. But it also lets them know we all feel like that. We are all working on our regulation all day. So it shows them I use the strategy. I'm not just telling you, oh, you're in yellow, take a deep breath, go walk away. It shows that we're all using those same strategies. So it's really important. And then for the children, we identify like, oh, I see you're in the yellow. Let's go over here, and do an activity. And again, the biggest thing is catching the yellow. You can do it in the red, but it's really a lot easier. If you're at a family party, Christmas just happened, and maybe there was some situations where you got overwhelmed. Seeing that in your child and bringing them over to do a fun activity over here away from the big group, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, can bring their arousal level back to green, and then they can go back and join the group. They haven't gone all the way to having a huge meltdown in the middle of a family party. They didn't get to red. And you can talk about it later, like, I saw that you were in the yellow, so remember when we came over here and we played with the putty and we did some stuff, and then you went back, you felt better. And so it's starting to train them what to be aware of in themselves. And then quite quickly, kids will go, I'm in the yellow, I need to go and do something. And so that's the goal, where they start to understand and come to you and regulate, or they start to understand and go get their own regulation. And
I love that you said that, because that's so many times when kids come in and they've got these really heightened sensory systems, and they're dealing with a lot of anxiety or shortness in their temper because of whatever the underlying challenge is. Having that as a tool is really important, moms and dads, because we use this term in our practice a lot: nerves that wire together fire together, right? And so when you talked about how you can feed into a kid's anxiety and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Having that as a family tool is an incredibly empowering thing for any family. And I've witnessed many of our kids who implement this in their own homes, where it gives them an awareness when they can come in and say, yeah, I had a yellow day today, right? They didn't go over the edge, and they'll talk about how they were able to back themselves down. And that's success. And it's important to wire in success, right? Because when a child feels like things are out of control, then they feel powerless. And moms and dads, you as well, right? When you feel like you don't have a strategy, you can feel powerless. Strategies like zones of regulation for kids that are dealing with a lot of these types of challenges can give your entire family a sense of control that oftentimes feels like it's been lost. And I think that's an enormously powerful strategy for you to be able to own, because it helps everybody, not just the child. It helps the entire family's dynamic, helps them to get through complex situations that otherwise they would have melted down in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful tool, and it really is an empowerment for everybody.
It is.
And it's great to use with like other family members that are not totally understanding what's going on with your child. Explaining to them about the fact that sometimes, so Johnny gets overwhelmed and he's in the yellow, so we're going to do this. Because they might say, well, why are you leaving the party earlier? Why are you taking him over there? And so explaining to them that this is actually a tool makes much more sense. Then you kind of avoid the, oh, well, you're just babying him, or you're not disciplining enough, or whatever. It's like, no, I am doing a tool. This is a very specific behavioral discipline tool. And so that really helps with that as well.
Yeah, and it's powerful. I've watched so many kids have tremendous success with this, because when obviously, so in my practice, we work with the perspective of knowing that we help with kids that have these from a different perspective, right? We work from the place of the reflex, where when kids come into us, what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the way the input's coming into their brain, so that when we work in co-management, then Chris's job is easier, right? We want her to be able to have less barriers, because we talked about that proprioceptive system and its role in the way that it feeds the brain. And from what we work with is we know that we help to refine the proprioceptive system to normalize a lot of the other sensory systems. And it makes the job of the occupational therapists easier, because they're not dealing with as much of the background noise for all intents and purposes. But in the process, there's oftentimes a lot of refinement that's necessary, and a lot of tools that are necessary to help a child as they go through all of the processes, whether it's occupational therapy alone, whether it's chiro and OT, or it's whatever the situation is. It helps everyone to be able to go and understand what's going on, and then be able to help themselves through stressful situations, because life happens.
It does.
It's just the nature of the beast.
It does. And that play back and forth between what you do and what we do is so critical, because a lot of times, like you said, it sort of just opens that up. And sometimes when you open it up, because a child has never lived in that feeling, they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
So then to be able to refine and go, this is a good place, because sometimes it's scary. Sometimes you open up a system and you're like, great, it's more regulated, but the child's like, but I've never functioned like this. And so that back and forth of you keeping the system and the flow going and open, and us being able to help refine, it works amazing. It does.
Yeah. It's a beautiful marriage of the way that our two professions work, because I've watched so many kids that we've seen back and forth where we can do things to try and get things moving in the right direction, but boy, when you couple the two together, the pace of change is absolutely phenomenal. Because we get very challenging kids who come in, whether it's sensory or autism or whatever it might be, and watching the way that they can start really making big, very tangible, very palpable changes much faster is awesome when the two are coupled together. So I'd like to dig in and spend a little bit of time on ADHD, because this is also something that it seems like it's everywhere, right?
Yes.
And literally it is. We're 1 in 5 kids in the school systems right now that are being diagnosed with ADHD, which is obviously, if you have a child that's struggling with this, the impact this has.
Right.
So why don't you talk to us a little bit clinically about the differences between ADHD and ADD?
Sure. So ADHD and ADD, with ADHD, you're really looking at that impulsive, faster paced issue. With ADD, you're really looking at more I didn't hear all the steps you said, I didn't turn my paper in, I'm not as organized. You have some of that with the ADHD too, more as a secondary for the fact that you're moving and busy, and you're missing directions because you've already left the space. So those two kind of fall out a little differently in that extent. The ADHD, you're going to be more fidgety, and for a younger child, you're zooming the room, whereas the ADD, you're just not focusing on those. But it's interesting. I'll have parents come in and but on this particular thing, they can play Legos for hours, or they can watch a movie for hours, and that doesn't negate ADHD. It's can you do some of the functional daily tasks that move through your day and focus on those. Usually kids will pick a preferred something, and they've got attention for that preferred activity, endless.
Yep.
So those are the two things that kind of fall out. And really clinically, if you would to go to a doctor or a psychologist or whatever to have them do a diagnostic, they look in what's called the DSM-5, and it has a whole list of, I think there's about 9 items, and if there's at least 6 of those that are present, especially present before like age 12, then you know you're heading in that direction, and that's where some of that diagnostic comes from. And a lot of those red flags are similar red flags to what we see for sensory. So teasing that out can be challenging.
Yep. And it's important to be able to tease those things out because, you know, so many times we get very frustrated with our kids. Is it just something where they're not working hard enough? But in reality, moms and dads, oftentimes there's things going in the background that they can't regulate. And, you know, we see this all the time where kids are they get frustrated, and oftentimes I'm sure you hear the same thing, right? They say, why can't I?
Right.
Right? They feel broken.
Yes.
And it's not them that's broken. There's just sometimes things that happen where the brain can't bring it all together or the brain can't slow it down. And that's the importance of recognizing when there's something more than just a kid being a kid at play.
Right, right. Yeah, and we definitely see a lot of self-esteem issues, especially as they hit school age. They start to notice, hey, my friends can sit and they can, you know, the person next to me can write all their stuff out, and I'm only getting 2 or 3, and I'm not done, and the bell rings, or I'm trying to do the 100 math facts, and I'm halfway through, and they're done. You know, and so it does. You start to think like, well, there's something wrong with me. And as far as I loved your comment about parents thinking like, well, they're not working hard enough. Most of the time, the child is actually working harder than their peers just to stay at that level and still not being successful. So how frustrating is that? I'm working harder than you, and I'm still not making it. And then, of course, that's where I must be. It breaks my heart, but I have kids coming going, I'm stupid. And I'm like, you are absolutely not stupid. You are super smart. But you have to work harder. So let's find the strategies so that you don't have to work as hard. You know, sometimes it's auditory filtering. I can't filter out all the other noise to focus in on the adult. I hear this person erasing, I hear this person tapping their pencil, and I lost what the teacher said. You know, so it can be as easy as that, and there's some great therapeutic listening and different strategies we can do for that. It could be as easy as I have tactile defensiveness and my clothes are itchy, so I can't even think about what you're talking about right now. I'm focusing on my clothes. And then, like I said, a lot of times we open it up and maybe there is an attention thing underneath there as well, or maybe those were all causing us to not have good attention or to be hyperactive looking, you know. So there's a lot of directions you can go with that.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that's important to keep in mind, moms and dads, is that every child's brain is going to work differently and has different things that are underlying that when you discover what the real imbalance is in brain connection coordination, once the right strategy hits, you realize that your child's a rock star. I mean, you know, and if you look at it from the perspective of, you know, people who we all have heard of, right? Your Einsteins, Beethovens, and Bachs would have all been clinically diagnosed as kids with ADHD, right? And at some point in time, they were able to find a way to focus it in, right? But here's the really great thing about working in the fields that we do, is that we have the ability to help the child's brain to be able to bring it together faster, because now, you know, science has given an understanding of what's going on underneath, and so there's a million great techniques that can be utilized to help to, number one, flesh out what the imbalance is, right? Because if the right side of brain and left side of brain aren't in sync, then it's very difficult for a child's brain to organize and filter the information coming in. So Chris, let's talk about some of the strategies that you use, and then what parents can expect when you're working with ADHD and ADD.
Sure. So with ADHD and ADD, we would still do a full assessment to look at what other sensory systems might be contributing. And sometimes those sensory systems will kind of accentuate the attention issues. Like maybe there's a true attention deficit, but I also have that auditory filtering thing, so now I can't pay attention at all. So we would look at those systems and we would determine, okay, so this is an auditory filtering, so we're going to do therapeutic listening, we're going to do some nice deep pressure input. There's a whole list of some deep pressure fun activities as well as the deep pressure brushing that helps calm down the exact same pathways that calm down when you get a massage. You know, so it's that same chemical release, those same pathways. So we look at that, you know, how can we get you prepped and ready? And like I talked about earlier, we do a lot of prep for the activities, so spacing out what we call a sensory diet, putting activities throughout your day. Just like if you were to take on a new diet, they always recommend small amounts of food frequently throughout the day. That's what the sensory diet is. It's having the right amounts of sensory input for your system. Yours is different than mine, so
Yep.
my activities are going to look different than yours frequently throughout the day. Get up and move, get up and carry something, have a crunchy snack, suck through a straw, any of those kind of things to re-regulate, get back in the green,
Yep.
and be ready to focus. And so we would establish a sensory diet. That would be something they can do at school as well as at home, as well as what are things to do before you go to a gathering or an activity that might be overwhelming. What are your quickie in the moment things to do when you're there if you start to notice you're getting unraveled. And then a lot of parent training, and then parents come back and say, here's what we tried, these worked, these didn't, here's what we tried, and then we're almost always assessing, because we're just constantly readjusting what worked, what didn't. And what's nice is as you move through and your body gets more regulated, things that you needed in the beginning, you don't need those as much, but there's a new activity that you need or a new level of stuff that we can go to. And it's always fun to work with parents, and we come up on this new problem that a year ago we couldn't even gotten to that problem. We're on this basic, I can't even get through my day. Now we're at the, I'm trying to remember, to do all the things for bedtime routine, and so it's fun to kind of get to those new higher level problems of like, oh, we're just working on remembering to brush our teeth and, put our pajamas on. But last year we were screaming from when we got home from school until bedtime and maybe even for a while. So it's fun to see the movement through all those different stages.
And that's amazing, and because a lot of moms and dads, when they come in, these struggles are so profound, and there's so many they're trying to work through. And one of the things oftentimes I'll try and illustrate for them is that our sensory system is not too different than like a teapot. You really want to have some slack, right? So instead of having the teapot turned all the way up to level 9 where it's ready to boil, you want it to have it level 2. So there's room. So you can dump it a little bit and handle it and be able to filter it and process it and do what you're supposed to without being too close to the boiling point.
Right.
And when you talk about the sensory diet, I love that because small amounts of stimulation over a prescribed period of time allows your child's nervous system to be able to build up, progressively handle more, at the same time training the brain's pathways so they get smoother, more refined, kind of like when moms and dads go to the gym, right? It's the same principles, right? When you go to the gym, right, we work our muscles, but we train our brains, right? Because it's what does all of the work. And it's the exact same thing, is that you have to train the pathways, and to get the best results, you have to train them frequently in small amounts so you get that ability to handle the amount of stimulus without going over the edge. Because fatigability is something that a lot of parents aren't really aware of. And I actually just had this conversation yesterday with a parent where the child had been doing very well, but over the weekend there was a pretty good sized meltdown, and we started talking about the activities, right? What did the child do over the weekend and what was different? And so, there was a sleepover, right? And sleepover is awesome, but of course, what's the one thing that everybody loses when there's a sleepover and they get a bunch of people? Sleep. Right? Well, it charges our batteries.
Yeah.
And so if your child's batteries are at a lower level, right, it brings them closer to the boiling point, because sleep is super important for recovery and charging our batteries and being able to go and have enough slack in the system. And the second that we don't have enough slack, what's going to happen? Going to melt down.
Get overwhelmed. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that that's something that you address with parents, because that's something that there's a lot of lack of awareness when people are coming into a setting like this, where if they understand the importance of fatigue management.
Yes.
Right?
Definitely.
That's a huge issue.
Definitely. And sleep is a huge piece, as is nutrition.
Yep.
And a lot of the kiddos either don't fall asleep well or do wake up during the night, so they're not getting their good REM sleep. And a lot of them don't eat the nice variety of foods and drink enough water.
Oh yeah.
So those are huge things too. If you think of yourself in terms of, like you said, if you have a couple nights in a row you don't sleep, your fuse is so short.
Yep.
You're like, why did I yell at that person about that? That's not a big deal, but you just do. And so kids have the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so if your child's not sleeping well, it's gonna really impact it.
Yep.
And same with eating. If they're not eating enough of the good foods, it will.
Yeah, and that's something I think that's an important topic to bring into this conversation too, because nutrition is really important, and a lot of times it's something it's underemphasized clinically, and if you want to really understand what your child's going through, it's a fuel system, right? But the fuel system has to be balanced and regulated, right? And what's the single biggest thing, or a couple of bigger things that you see that really can alter a child's ability to see success nutritionally?
We have several of our kiddos that either only eat proteins, which that's great, proteins are great, or eat no meats.
Right.
A no protein-based vegetables that they can really get that protein from. We have kids that have dietary either intolerances or allergies. So entire food groups they're eating and they don't realize. And so they, you know, go to a diet that's maybe dairy-free or gluten-free or something like that and see a huge change. Definitely kids that are not getting enough of just, I mean, a lot of kids don't eat their green leafies and stuff like that, and there's so much in those, as well as the hydration. We have kids doing juices or sometimes pop and stuff like that, and they're not getting water. Pop dehydrates you. You know, so not only you're not drinking water, but you're drinking something that's dehydrating you. So both the nutritional piece, but the hydration piece, huge.
It is. And you know, something that you also talked about too that we spend quite a bit of time highlighting is the importance of blood sugar regulation.
Yes.
You know, that's a huge issue because, you know, the more variable that a child's blood sugar is, the more variable their energy is going to be.
Right.
Because, you know, if you have a system where it's constantly volleying up and down all day long, hitting peaks and valleys, it's literally impossible for a child to get used to a consistent stream and source of energy. So, you know, whether it's going long periods of time without having food, right? You have to kick into your fight or flight system to be able to keep your blood sugar up, which is, you know, moms say that's a bad thing, right? Like, you don't want your child having to use their fight or flight system because you're trying to balance that system out, because it's what causes a lot of background noise and takes away their fuse. The other side is that we want to have things that keep their blood sugar nice and steady as well. Things that are, we talk a lot about the glycemic index, and the glycemic index is a big thing. And if you've never seen it, glycemicindex.com, great resources out there for you so you can understand the importance of this, because the glycemic index regulates how fast a food is absorbed by your body and the impact that it has on blood sugar. And we really want our kids to have very regulated, very steady blood sugar, because that's one very easily controllable factor when you don't allow a child's blood sugar to be up and down all day, especially at school.
Right, especially with sugary snacks and that kind of stuff. You know, it's the eating frequently throughout the day, little beats, but then eating heavy or like healthy things so that you can keep that blood sugar. And definitely, you know yourself, like if you have something, we always talk about like food coma, you have a bunch of carbs and then you kind of, you know, you're sort of zoned out, or you have a bunch of sugars and you're kind of on the sugar high and then you crash. And so you're right, if you're trying to stay regulated, it's really difficult. And as adults, we mentally know, we're like, oh, I had too many carbs, I'm kind of zoned out or something. Kids don't. They just know that, wow, I have all this energy and I'm zipping around, or oh, I have no energy, I can't even listen to you talking as a teacher or adult. So
and moms and dads, what you'll see is, you know, when your child has a lunch that's a high sugar lunch, right? A lot of simple carbohydrate foods. What you're probably getting from your teachers is that, boy, you know, after lunch he comes back and he's all over the place and I can't get him to sit still. But then about 2 hours later, all of a sudden he's in the tank because now his blood sugar has dipped back down, because now his body said, oh, I've got all this floating blood sugar, I got to store it. And so then his energy tanks, and then of course his mood tanks, or her mood tanks. So, and it's that blood sugar regulation cycle that is a really big deal in helping a child to be stable. So that's a really important topic for, and we can do some more videos I think about that in the future.
That is very important. We see that a lot.
Yeah, it's huge. So Chris, this has been fantastic. I think that hopefully all of our moms and dads have gotten a ton of value out of this. So if somebody would like to contact you directly, what would be the best way if they wanted to seek advice, consult, or have the child come in and get some care?
Sure. So I mean, you can always check out our Facebook page, but you can call us directly at the office. Like I said, I'm always available to talk to somebody on the phone for 5-10 minutes just to kind of run through a couple of things. At Abilities First, our phone number is 440-333-1880, but we're more than happy to just chat with you and just, you know, free consult just to see if this might be something, you know, or not. Also, some of the other programs, you know, there's some free sensory consults in the area. Some of the other Connecting for Kids, different things, they're running just free consults where you can actually go and sit with an occupational therapist for 15 minutes and have a free consult. So there's a variety of ways to get some information and, you know, just see if this is something that might be for your child, or, you know, rule it out.
That's wonderful.
Sure.
You know, since you did bring up Connecting for Kids, I would love if you could spend a minute, because I know you're on the board for Connecting for Kids. Would you please tell moms and dads who are looking for resources what this is?
Sure. So Connecting for Kids is a nonprofit in northeastern Ohio, and it specifically does exactly what that title says: connecting kids with resources. Parents can call with any concern about their child. You don't have to have a diagnosis. You could just say, I wonder if this is something. And there's a whole panel of people that are there answering the phone to send you, like, give you some information, point you towards some professionals in the, you know, in the community, as well as they provide all kinds of parent training, child learning activities on a variety of topics. They're free. A lot of times the parent trainings, they actually provide childcare, and the childcare they provide are retired special ed teachers, so they're engaging your child in fun activities while you're sitting in and getting some information from a professional. So it's an amazing opportunity just to connect with professionals or other families that might be going through the same thing you are or have the same questions you do. I think the biggest thing for any of this is just to realize you're not alone.
Right.
You know, sometimes parents will call and they think that they're their only child. I'm like, oh, we have an entire caseload of kiddos just like your child, and there's more people. You know, a lot of times even in the waiting room, I see parents just talking, just wanting to be able to share with another family, you know, ask questions, or if you've been in this for a while, being able to share is like, oh, well, I did this and this and it was helpful. I think that's really important too. You're not alone.
That is, it's so important. And moms and dads, I really encourage you to take advantage of these resources, because, you know, if this is the situation that you're in and you do feel like you're on a bubble and you're alone, I have seen many parents that have taken advantage of these resources, and it's really given them the support system and the education they need to be able to help their child, but also their family, because we can't ever step away from the family dynamic impact on this, because these things are stressors for everybody, not just for the child. And so you guys need support too. So please take advantage of the resources that she's given to you. And so what we'll do is in the follow up on the video, we'll also make sure that we get all of your contact information put in.
Great.
So if anybody wants to contact Chris's office, if you happen to forget what her contact information was, we'll have it listed. You can also reach out to us, and we're more than happy to connect you with Chris's office as well. And I thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to the Growing Healthy Families podcast, the world's #1 source for health education. Make sure to go to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a review. Make sure to follow us on social media at the links listed in the show notes, and let us know what area of health you are struggling with, so we can get you and your family on the road to epic health.